Blue Tyrants and the dumbest bill in America. This is Mark Fisher with Mark and the Millennials and the Millennial. Joining me today is Garrick Ross. How's it going, Garrick?
Happy Monday. Happy Tuesday to everybody at home. Happy 1 week closer to Memorial Day.
Yeah, happy quarantine whatever day. I'm not really sure which day we're on, but you know.
They all kind of blend.
Yeah, especially back here in the East Coast. And of course, we have Christopher Hopkins, our assistant producer, who's with us.
Hi, Chris.
Hey, Chris. And of course, Adam Couture, our producer. So this podcast is called Blue Tyrants. And of course, we have the dumbest bill in America. And the dumbest bill this week, by the way, is from a Republican, just saying,
we are equal opportunist haters here.
That's right. If we don't like the bill, we don't care who put it in.
Absolutely.
Because we think it's not necessary. So, Blue Tyrants. So first up, Michigan Attorney General, the Attorney General of Michigan, trashes a barber. That's right, a guy who owns a barbershop.
Yes.
And because he says he wants to open up. And this gentleman, I think, is well into his 70s. And his name's Carl Mankey. And in his own words, we have a clip from him as to why he's opening up in spite of the fact that the Michigan governor and the Michigan AG are saying, you better not open or we're going to arrest you. Here's the clip.
All of us as Americans need to begin to take responsibility for ourselves. You know, I feel that the government is not my mother, never has been. Right. I've been in business longer than they've been alive.
I love it. So I have to tell you guys something. This is really unique to that generation. The government, it's not my mother. And it's even funnier because Whitmer, of course, is a woman. And it's like, yeah, you're right. She is not my mother. She does not tell me when I can and cannot open my business. She has no authority to tell me when I can open up my business. And this guy is just, he's well into his 70s. If anything, he's putting himself at risk, and he's willing to do so. But he's willing to do so safely.
Yeah, to protect his livelihood. I mean, this is basically what the argument is about, and I understand that people are concerned about public health implications, but there is a economic implication that also is a public health implication as well, and you can't. And we talk about this every week. You can't just expect everybody to sit at home for undisclosed periods of time, because every time we do it, the burden shifts. The goalposts move. First it's 2 weeks, then it's 2 months, and then now it's who the hell knows when we're going back to work.
I mean, some states are saying, not until we get a vaccine.
Yeah, good luck with that. We don't even know if there will be a vaccine.
May never be a vaccine. And of course, the Michigan Attorney General and the Michigan Governor, naturally, they're very authoritarian. And I think they're very authoritarian in their own nature anyway, long before they were given the excuse with the pandemic of becoming, really kind of dictators.
It is the cliche argument that we've talked about in politics probably for the better part of the last 200 years is, what is the role of government in people's lives? And, people on this show and, in the conservative party generally believe that you are the best arbiter of your life and that the government doesn't know better than you do about your own needs, versus people like, the governor of Michigan who believe that the government should play a central role in your life, and that, in fact, the government does know better than you.
More than a central role, the government is all controlling.
Yeah.
I mean, this is basically a complete tyrannical government in Michigan. In fact, if you don't want to go to Carl Mankey's barbershop because you're concerned about your health, don't go.
Then don't go.
No one's making you go.
Nobody's making you go get a haircut.
Yes, he is putting himself perhaps in jeopardy, particularly since he's at high risk because he is well over 70. So if others don't want to go there, then don't go. They don't have to do so.
It's freedom, baby.
Yeah, it's called freedom, man.
You don't have to do it.
There is a risk every time you walk out your front door.
The KGB,
when you get into your car, you might get into a car accident.
Yeah, the KGB is not going to show up at your door and tell you, since the barber's open down the road, you got to go.
Yeah, and we're not saying here at Mark and the Millennials, by the way, we're not saying that you shouldn't take natural precautions like washing your hands all the time. And by the way, health departments are really heavily regulating anyway, barbers and hair salons and nail salons and so forth.
Yeah, it's not like
they're heavily regulated.
It's not like it's just a full store that he has to.
Exactly.
The people are lined up, sitting next to each other, reading the paper like before the pandemic. There is a lot going on in order for them to open. You're only allowed one person in most states. You're only allowed one person in the store. Everybody's got to be wearing masks.
Yes.
And
the idea of getting your hair shampooed is bye-bye.
Yeah,
That's not
just
done anymore.
Cutting the hair.
Just cutting your hair and then thank you, see you later.
Yes.
Pay me, thank you, see you later. Next person out, waiting outside in the cold or out in the 95-degree heat. Come on in.
Yeah, and even then, that's still I understand that that's necessary for health reasons, but there's still an economic burden there. I mean, people aren't making all the money that they could be making because the services that they offer are now severely diminished.
It's true. Now here is the Michigan AG basically trashing trash talking the barber, Carl Mankey, who says, you know what, the government's not my mother. And here's the Michigan AG. Here she is.
Do you have any plans to arrest Carl?
No, we don't have any plans to do that. Listen, we're not looking to throw people in jail. And that is, to me, a very, very, very last resort. We want him to discontinue his conduct, which we think is aiding and abetting in the spread of the virus. And if I can just say, you know, Mr. Mankey, he's not a hero to me. He's not a patriot. A patriot is a person that fights all enemies to our country, foreign and domestic, and does everything possible to protect his fellow countrymen and countrywomen. And to me, Mr. Mankey is doing just the opposite of that. And he's being selfish in his behavior, in that what he's doing is allowing the virus to spread.
That's the AG, the Attorney General of Michigan, saying that Mr. Mankey, the barber, is not a patriot. Because he is aiding and abetting the enemy, which is the pandemic. It's COVID-19. Who does she think she is?
Well, by that logic, if you go back to the American Revolution, everybody who was a revolutionary wasn't a patriot because they weren't,
they weren't following the rules
and supporting their fellow countrymen. I'm not saying this is some giant, political revolution like it's 1776 or whatever, but let's just follow the logic to its inevitable conclusion. And what she's trying to say here, that he's not a patriot. There are a lot of people very upset, and I think you're going to start seeing a lot of social movements and people. Protests, which are ordinarily very small, are going to continue to get a lot bigger as people are.
What's remarkable is
disenfranchised.
Here's what's remarkable. It is the blue states, because it's the blue tyranny that this is coming from.
Yeah.
Almost exclusively, but the people who are pushing back are not necessarily exclusively Republican or Democrats or Independents.
Business owners.
It's business owners who are saying, look, my entire life, I've been self-employed. My entire life, I've been very independent-minded and a critical thinker. I can figure this out, because if I opened my own business and took that risk, this is a pretty small risk in the overall scheme of things to be able to use reasonable precautions to make sure that I don't get sick.
Yeah, I certainly understand. I agree. I think this is really the crux of the argument. And you said it best, it really is blue states versus red states.
Yes.
And it's unfortunate. Would I like to have seen, some kind of an even-handed distribution here? No. Well, yes, but no, this isn't what we got, And look at a lot of the success stories in a lot of these red states, and we talk about it every week, and we're going to point to them again. Look at the two biggest populist three, Texas, Georgia, Florida. We're talking about three very big red states,
Heavily populated. Not just big geography-wise, but obviously heavily populated.
Heavily populated, a lot of urban centers in
Yes.
the state as well, and yet they're keeping their numbers down. Infection rates are low, and deaths are down, and yet businesses are opening.
And they're trying to minimize bankruptcies in their business community and deaths from heart attacks from people worrying about not being able to pay their bills.
Suicide, people not seeking care because they're scared.
Yes.
They're trying to make sure that they can accommodate all the individual issues that are going on at a time like this.
And here's Governor Whitmer. You have to listen to Heil Whitmer. That's what I'm going to call her now. Heil Whitmer. Listen to what she says about Carl Mankey, the barber, but just generally speaking, what she says about her stay-at-home order and that you must not be able to open up your business. Here's the clip.
These executive orders are not a suggestion. They're not optional. They're not helpful hints. This is an order to prevent the spread of COVID-19.
This is an order. This is an order. This is Heil Whitmer. Who does she think she is? Think about this. When was the last time you heard a governor or any executive elected to public office who said, this is an order? You can't open up your business. This is an order. I'm sorry.
I don't think Andrew Cuomo was that brash about it, He was a little bit, at least, more empathetic about the whole thing.
Well, he's more mafioso when he talks anyway,
I think, he
I
gets
might
his
break
point
your
across.
knees, I'm going to break your knees if you don't listen to what I'm going to do.
I'll break your economic
He certainly
knees.
sounds that way, by the way, and when he talks, Cuomo does. And by the way, so does his brother, Chris Cuomo. They both sound the same, which is like, if you don't listen to me, I'm going to go after your whole family, not just you.
At least Andrew's done something. Chris is a bit of a aloof
he's
Fredo over there on CNN.
The dumb one of the family.
Oh, yeah.
So talk about blue tyrants. So in New Jersey, There's a gym owner who just basically reopened today, and he's defying the governor's order. And my understanding is there's some breaking news about this.
The gym is a central part of the New Jersey lifestyle.
Especially Jersey Shore.
Especially the Jersey Shore. It's bicep curls, Mark, triceps extensions exclusively.
Says the guy from Jersey. Yes, it apparently is. Now it does seem that way because every time you see like a show, certainly Jersey Shore
in Jersey,
or any kind of show that's doing Jersey, it's
gym.
always a bunch of guys, like, hey, yeah, look at me, oh my God.
Everybody walking around in tank tops with their arms popped out like this.
But the fact of the matter is that gyms are being particularly, and so are hotels and restaurants, but gyms also are being particularly targeted because of the fact that
you're in close proximity. There's a lot of bodily fluids and things going on.
But you're also, you're touching. You're touching all of the workout equipment, and then the next person is doing the same thing, and then the next person, and then as you said, you're sweating.
Yes.
So
you're breathing heavily. If you're a little out of shape, like some people I know, you cough a bit. And, it's.
Who are you referring to?
Myself.
Oh. So get this. So apparently, this New Jersey gym owner opened. However, the police, and it made national news, and actually the media was there as well, because he responsibly opened, and he talked about how he was going to do so responsibly. Everybody was wearing a face mask, at least the owners of the gym, both of those owners were wearing a face mask. And he said, look, from this point forward, we let people in. We've separated the equipment even more. We've taken a lot of equipment out of the room. We're going to, take all these precautions. Everything's going to be fine. And in Oceanside, California, the same thing. Another gym there. They've defied the police order.
These beach communities, Mark. I'm sensing a theme here.
That's right. You got to look good when you live, near the beach, especially.
Oh, yeah.
One side, the West Coast and the East Coast. Seems like it's Jersey and also naturally,
probably somewhere near Venice
Cali,
Beach or something.
Probably. Yeah. Well, I'm not sure. They're too. Most of those people seem like they're a little bit too stoned to actually really care about the way they look. If you've ever been to Venice Beach, I've been there a few times, and they look like they moved out to California and they forgot where they were from ever
Hang
since they've
loose,
been
bro.
there.
They're out there surfing.
So we have a clip from Oceanside, California. This is the gym owner. Honestly, the police are put into a tough position, and we'll talk about that in a second. And here is the clip.
No one has a business plan that says $0 coming in for 2 months.
Our businesses must be allowed to open as fast and as safe as possible.
Oceanside City Council member Christopher Rodriguez continues to speak up for Uredale and others in the same position, making it loud and clear that he doesn't agree with the governor's plan to keep gyms closed until phase 3.
The number one phone call I get is from a business owner that says, I have to shut down. My life savings is gone.
Oceanside Mayor Pete Wise sent a letter saying that business owners and individuals must continue to follow the county public health order. Oceanside police did not show up to the rally in the gym's parking lot, but say they're put in a tough position.
Yeah, so I think that's true. So the police are put in a tough position because for those out there in podcast land, if you want to know how this actually works, when the governor signs these executive orders, which I don't think are enforceable anyway, but the governor is enforcing the executive order, such as with these two gyms, by saying to the state police, because every state has a state police department, I want you to enforce these executive orders. And the state police then, they have a diktat to all of their state police officers throughout the state to say, hey, look, if you drive by a gym, and also we heard that gym in Oceanside is going to open and defy the order, so we want you to go there and shut them down and do what it takes to shut them down. And that's the state police then, and all the states. That is the enforcement arm and the enforcement mechanism to enforce what the governors are doing. And what I'm hoping is, by the way, this puts the police in a really tough position because I don't think a lot of the police officers believe that this is necessary.
It's also an interesting dynamic about the role of state police in municipal affairs, because from my understanding, and I'm going to say this based off my experience with New Jersey. I'm not sure how California does it. In New Jersey, there are only certain jurisdictions where certain state police barracks and things like that are allowed to, enforce laws. For New Jersey, state troopers exclusively do mostly highway patrol, or unless a county has a deal with the state police for them to enforce,
So it's like Reno 911.
Yeah, basically. or what's the favorite movie of mine? Super Troopers.
Super Troopers.
Yeah, that's basically what they do all day. A town can contract them instead of having a police force, they'll come and patrol. So it'd be interesting, say you're in a county that is, very welcoming to business and is defying the governor's orders and wants to have some kind of economic growth, and you have a state police, officer come in and effectively shut down a business where the local sheriff or the local whoever has said that we're not going to enforce these orders. It's making for very interesting,
it does.
Dynamic within federalism itself between not just, the state and the federal government, but between the state and the local government.
This is one of the reasons, that's a great point. So this is one of the reasons why I like when sheriffs are elected at the local level.
Yeah.
Because what I've seen as well,
Your
Garrick,
law is accountable to the people.
Is that the sheriffs are unwilling to enforce these orders, like Governor Heil Whitmer said. And then what they do is they defer then to the state police.
Yes.
Because the state police are unelected. They're appointed by at least the top state police officers.
The superintendents usually
they're usually appointed by the governor.
Yes.
And so therefore they feel like they must, listen to what the governor tells them, because the governor could then replace them. And that is the dynamic that's going on. But I've always supported local sheriffs to be elected by the people, because then, if you feel like you're living in a police state, you can at least express yourself at the polls in a proper way.
Yeah.
But notwithstanding that, it is the fact that the police officers are being put in a very difficult position by the government, telling people who are small business owners, who are, by the way, the salt of the earth, it's what keeps our economy going, and they're being told, you have to stay at home, go bankrupt. And by the way, government is not going to be there for you. We'll give you a little bit of money to collect unemployment. But in order to recover everything that you've lost when we finally get out of the pandemic, government's not going to be there for you to help you.
I saw a number. It was like 40% of the jobs lost because of the crisis here aren't going to come back. So that means 40% of businesses likely aren't coming back.
Not coming back. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. But next up, we have a Seattle cop is fired for protesting because Governor Jay Inslee had him fired because he said people who don't cooperate with contact tracers will be confined without food. Now, there is a clip on this. We didn't pull up the clip on this because we just for a time issue. But this governor, Jay Inslee, obviously this guy is a nut. He's the ultimate blue tyrant.
Governor
without question.
G.I. Joe.
He's Governor G.I. Joe, and but. This is what happens when a governor or an individual really doesn't believe in democracy. They believe in tyranny, and they believe that they can say anything and there's never going to be any kind of, because he lives in a blue state. He figures no one's ever going to throw me out.
Yeah, there's all of 2 voting blocks there, and they're all voting Democrat reliably.
Exactly.
Yeah, so he can do whatever he wants, and I'm sure that's what the people there, you vote for what you get for.
That's true. That is a fact.
You get what you vote for. So.
And in New York City, talk about the other side of police officers, but the fact that there is difficulty when you're a police officer, and I am incredibly sympathetic, so I want to make that really clear. But the New York City police handcuff a young woman and her toddler, who, by the way, are wearing face masks around their neck. It's attached around their neck, but they have it below their chin. They didn't pull it up over their mouth and over their nose, but it was nonetheless, without question there in the video. The young woman and her toddler, they arrest the young woman because she is not wearing a face mask properly. Now, to be fair, she was on the subway, and she was getting off the subway, and they were like, look, if there's any place where we think you should be wearing this, it's indoors. And
on the subway, especially.
On the subway, especially.
Where a lot of people ride it, people are very close together.
But this is not a good look. It's not a good look for the New York City police. It's not a good look for police anywhere.
And the New York City police have a very...
impossible job.
Yeah, but it's, between the people who manage them and the relationship with the people, it is a very fragile relationship in New York City. They already don't have a lot of goodwill within the community, but having people like Bill de Blasio,
they've got a terrible mayor. Thank you for mentioning that.
People like Bill de Blasio being their mayor makes it a lot harder because he puts them between a rock and a hard place, and then is so willing to throw them to the curb the second there's any kind of controversy.
He does not have their back at all.
No.
Having said that, look. When you watch this video, it's very uncomfortable because, and we have a short clip on this, because they're arresting this woman in front of her toddler and they both do have masks, and the mask is, around their neck and underneath their chin. It's just not covering their mouth and their nose. And she, of course, is mouthing off, which is naturally a mistake. You shouldn't do that to police officers. And certainly you should wear your mask properly when you're on a subway. I mean, at a minimum, certainly in a city like New York, at least for now, But we have a clip of this, and it's just kind of a sign of the times of the tyranny, and here it is. You hear the subway in the background.
She got a kid with her. She got a kid with her, man. That's too much, man. You're a female, that's too much. Mask on. She got a mask on. The baby even on. That's too much, man.
Yeah, so there you go. You heard the police officer said she was talking on the phone without a mask. That was the issue, even though she did have the mask, but she didn't have it covering her mouth and her nose properly. Look, here's the thing. If you have a barbershop, like Mr. Mankey in Michigan, or if you have a gym, like these gentlemen in Oceanside, California, and in New Jersey or elsewhere, people aren't forced to come into your store. They don't have to, so you should be able to reopen immediately without question and just take reasonable precautions. But on the subway in New York City, that's different. Because there are a lot of people that have to get on the subway. They don't have a choice to get from point A to point B.
Especially in New York City.
In New York City.
Transit's not readily available. Otherwise.
You don't have a choice there. Yeah. So as a result, you should be wearing a mask. And it just is a bad look, though, when you have, 4 or 5 police officers arresting this person. Yeah. It's just with her toddler. It looks really bad.
Within inches of her. And, that's a lot of people in a very close space. Social distancing. Definitely out the window there. Do I think that she should have talked through the mask into the phone? Sure, yeah. But like you said, it's not a good look. I mean,
here's an idea. Like this, why do you have to talk on your phone when you're in the subway anyway? It's obnoxious. You ever been with somebody in the subway of any major city or metro, in the greater Washington, D.C. area?
I'm surprised they get service down there. That's a separate story.
It's like they're talking as if, and you're part of the conversation because they're right there. And it's just like, shut up. How about texting? How about doing that when you're in a public place?
Police officers just, give her a little bit of advice.
I'm sorry, that's a uniquely millennial thing. Well, although millennials would rather text, I think, than
I would rather text.
Yeah, I think that's a fact.
Maybe she was talking to her mom on the phone. Who knows?
Yeah, but she could have waited till she went outside.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of room in there for a lot of people to do a little bit of things better. Small things better. Should she be, definitely not talking on the subway, especially because, they talk about, the particles and the particulates, respiratory and things like that. The police officers have handled that a lot better. Absolutely.
So Garrett,
talk to her. Just be like, hey, could you wear the mask, please?
That makes too much sense. I think they tried that. But in New York, of course, it always sounds, you being from Jersey, you definitely, it's relatable because it's never like, hey, ma'am, would you please wear your mask? It's like, hey, why aren't you wearing a mask? I mean, it's never like
everything's very
polite.
Forceful. Everything sounds, look, if you're from a place that has, stereotypical culture of nicety, people are nice to each other, and you go to New York, you'd probably be scarred by how we talk to each other.
It's scarred for life, no doubt.
Everybody's just mean to each other as a predisposition, and it's all meant with love. So.
Yeah, sure. So New York City Mayor, speaking of New York City Mayor de Blasio, he had an interview with Maria Bartiromo of Fox Business, and she asked de Blasio, well, what about your sanctuary city policies and the crime rate that's just soaring in New York City? And the sanctuary city policies are relevant in New York City because in order to be able to get federal funding, many of the United States senators who are Republican, as well as in the House of Representatives who are Republican, believe that you should be able to provide the benefits in the stimulus money to folks who are here legally. And de Blasio basically says, well, I don't really care because the fact of the matter is that when that money comes, I'm going to give it to whomever I want to give it to. So we have a clip on that, and you have to listen to this to believe it. And here is the clip.
And again,
is there any way you could pull back on your sanctuary city laws and follow the rule of the law when it comes to immigration?
We follow
then maybe
the
the Trump administration will want to work with you.
We follow the rule of the law in this city. And we respect the fact there's 500,000 people here who happen to be undocumented. And the U.S. Supreme Court said in 2012 that the federal government does not have, in a federal system that respects states and localities, does not have the ability, because of its own policy preferences, to penalize cities that are trying to provide security and safety. You know the funding that President Trump originally threatened for the city? It was for the NYPD for our anti-terrorism efforts. That makes no sense at all. So we're going to stick to our policies, which the Constitution protects, and we're going to serve our people and create a place that's safe for everyone.
So actually, that's a bunch of nonsense, because Congress can withhold money in any bill that it wants to, that Congress agrees to pass, based on the fact that they want the money to be used for certain things. It is federal money, after all, and the money is being passed on to the states and localities, and Congress can make certain restrictions as to whether or not they want the money to be used for one thing versus another. And this matters because of the fact that de Blasio has done such a terrible job managing New York City.
Even before the pandemic. There are people who have good hearts and they're just, not good at their job. Bill de Blasio does not have a good heart, and he is terrible at his job regardless. He has never done anything because it was practical. He has only ever done it because it was expedient to him. He is a terrible leader, and I can bash Bill de Blasio 6 ways from Sunday.
The guy that wanted to be president, that couldn't even run a city.
Good God. But, it stems to other things. I read an article the other day. I encourage you all at home to Google it. It's, I believe, in either New York Magazine or whatever. And it's talking about Bill de Blasio. And you know how, for a lot of people, it's been the health departments that have done a lot of the efforts in every state to kind of, come in and save a lot of these places from ongoing COVID issues.
Sure.
Bill de Blasio, for whatever reason, decided to take the contact tracing program out of his health department's hands, and he gave it to his hospitals department, a related agency that does not handle any of these issues. They just simply manage the hospitals in the New York system. And the only reason he did that is political expediency, because the person that he tapped to be the head of the hospitals has been particularly, kind to de Blasio, whereas
that's de Blasio.
The health department has been, but it gets in the way of good governance. And he's never done anything because it was necessary, but because it benefited him. And this is just another instance of it. Bill de Blasio's speech there that we just listened to is another instance of it. He is going to do whatever he wants because he wants to, regardless of whether it's good
Maria
policy.
Bartiromo, she's actually she's a very good business anchor. And she would be a good business anchor on any news outlet, not just Fox. She would be good on any of them if they actually wanted to hire her. The reason she was interviewing de Blasio was because she was talking about, the economy. And de Blasio naturally is deflecting the fact that, New York, it's been tough. It's the pandemic. It's all the pandemic. And she was arguing with him about the fact that it's just been poorly managed as a city. Mm-hmm. And get this. 420,000 wealthy New Yorkers have fled the city during the pandemic. 420,000 in the wealthy areas of Manhattan have fled the city.
And they might never come back.
And they may never, and that is the whole point of the article. It's in the Daily Mail. And it's the whole point of the article is, will they come back? Will they sublet their co-ops or their apartments? Yeah. Will they sell them?
It's an interesting conversation,
and
because a lot of these places have businesses, and now they have to deal with things like remote workforce and things like that. And I think there's going to be a lot of companies in New York especially that are going to be tired of the high rent rates and things like that, and they're going to move because, in our society, mobility is a lot easier to achieve now versus historical times, is because of
certainly with the wealthy,
strides in communications and things like that. And
by the way, good old de Blasio said to Maria Bartiromo, who's talking about that very issue, about all the wealthy New Yorkers who have left the city during the pandemic. Yeah. And her question to him was, are they coming back? And he goes, you know what? We make plenty of millionaires. Every time we have a recession, we end up having people who go, they leave the city, and then we have new millionaires that are minted. So we always make more millionaires than we lose. So we really don't care. Imagine anyone who governs that way.
I would love to see the numbers on that statement.
I'm sure it's not true.
Where's your data there, big guy?
And if he were true to his Bernie Sanders socialism, he wouldn't even be saying it that way. He would. It shows you what a tool this guy is. He's always been a tool.
Yeah, he just kind of sticks his finger into the wind to see which way it's blowing.
Exactly. And it's going to matter because if 420,000 wealthy New Yorkers have fled during the pandemic. What if only half come back? That is a massive hit on their budget.
Yeah, which is already going to be free falling as a result.
And real estate too. I mean, I know people who have left New York during the pandemic.
Real estate's a huge part of the economy.
They say that their landlords are calling them up saying, "Hey, are you going to re-up for your rental?" And they're like, "Well, yeah." And the landlords, "Well, let's talk about that. I might offer you, some discounted rate moving forward because there are going to be not very many people moving back as compared to how many people left."
I can't remember what year de Blasio won his second term, but I cannot wait for it to be over.
He reminds me of the old Mayor Dinkins. With the complete idiot who ran New York City.
Heaven forbid he can run for a third term, because I know, it's bringing Bloomberg back in. They changed the state charter or whatever to allow a third term for mayor to keep Bloomberg in there. I hope they don't do the same for de Blasio. It's time for him to go.
Blue Tyrants, talking about Blue Tyrants about this podcast. So Joe Rogan, the famous podcaster, obviously does an amazing job, says he might leave California because of the lockdown policies in Los Angeles, in the greater Los Angeles area, of course also in the state of California. And why does that matter? It matters because, Joe Rogan performs at comedy clubs and other kinds of clubs.
Yeah, he was a comedian first before becoming a podcaster and a mixed martial art analyst. He has
done all kinds of things.
Quite the resume there.
Yeah, he does.
He is quite the interesting character.
He's terrific at podcasts as well, absolutely. I mean,
talks about a lot of things. He's a great interviewer.
And he says he would consider going to Texas, maybe Austin in particular.
Beautiful city in Austin.
He said comedy clubs might not open until 2022. Might not open. He says, so where can I go? I might as well move somewhere.
If they're not opening until 2022, you're not having comedy clubs.
You're not going to have comedy clubs, certainly not in California.
No.
And obviously Los Angeles, the greater Los Angeles area, is a hub for talent. Specifically, anybody who wants to act, somebody who wants to be in a comedy club, what have you, any kind of club. And he's like, I might leave. We have a clip on that. And here it is.
If California continues to be this restrictive, I don't know if this is a good place to live. First of all, it's extremely expensive. The taxes here are ridiculous.
Yeah.
And if they really say that we can't do stand-up until 2022 or something like that, I might jet.
Yeah.
I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
I'm not kidding. This is silly. I don't need to be here. The only reason why I'm here is that I'm close to people like you.
Right.
A lot of my friends live here.
Yeah.
The store's here. But if they won't let us do the store, but we could do stand-up other places, why would we stay here?
Yeah, he might jet. I like that term. I might jet.
I might
get on my jet and just jet out of here. It's kind of funny to hear this because obviously we have this in our podcast because Joe Rogan is so influential.
Yeah.
In particular, influential with millennials.
Yes.
And for millennials to hear this guy who's really, in Hollywood, might be somewhat of an outlier in many senses, but nonetheless part of Hollywood, is now saying, I don't care all the benefits I might get here as a result of being accessible to Hollywood, I might leave.
Yeah, Joe Rogan I view as somebody who embodies the non-political. He might be rich and whatnot from his, great career and whatever, but he is somebody who just approaches issues with an independent mind. He makes up his beliefs and he goes on about it. And I think he is indicative of what 80% of Americans really are. They're looking to get back to work. They're looking to live their lives free of, interference from Democrats or Republicans. And they just want to...
Like the Michigan barber and the gym owners. And that's why we included this particular clip of Joe Rogan, by the way, Garrick, because we included it because we're talking about, a barber who just wants to open up his business.
Yeah,
and government isn't his mother, as he said. We're talking about the guys who own gyms who's saying, you know what?
The guys who perform at stand-up clubs,
They're all the same.
Yeah.
We're all the same. We just want to open up our businesses. We want to live our lives. We get it. We get there's a pandemic. We get the whole social distancing
thing. But we can't do this forever. And we also have to move on with our lives. We can't stay confined because we're not meant to be that way. The bargain wasn't an indefinite stay at home. The bargain was 2 weeks to a month. We stay home. We get ahead of the curve. We flatten it. We get hospital capacity to a point where we can manage this long term.
Absolutely.
And we've done all of these things, and here we are still trying to have to, claw our way to get our businesses open.
And I think there's hope when you hear like the Joe Rogans of the world. What I hear is hope. I hear hope that we have these critical thinkers out there, and Elon Musk as well, who are these critical thinkers saying, you know what? We get it. We're educated. We understand all the things we have to do moving forward. Thank you, government. Now go back and be quiet because we the people run this country, not you.
Yeah.
I mean, just definitely ready for that next step.
Hit it right on the head.
So get this, podcast listeners. Former President Barack Obama gives a virtual commencement speech to the HBCUs in the United States. Those are the historically black colleges and universities. That's what an HBCU is. And they're all across the U.S. And he gives this virtual commencement speech. And the problem I have with this speech is that, once again, just when Barack Obama was president of the United States for 8 years, he had an historic opportunity to bring people together and to really have a vision for America moving forward and really make our country a true, post-slavery, racial country. Instead, he underscored those issues, and he chooses one or two instances that happen and say, well, that's who we really are. And this really drives me crazy because it's the equivalent of saying to someone who's had a 50-year career that the one mistake that they made in their career, and I'm not talking about a murder or something like that, it's just one mistake defines who they are. And it doesn't. Just like one issue or one incident in a certain state in this country defines the entire country and defines everyone. It does not. But that's who Barack Obama is.
One incident in a 250-year history with hundreds of millions of people across 50 states.
Well, listen closely,
the whole argument.
Because Barack is really Obama is really talking about that incident in Georgia, which obviously was a tragedy. That incident being where two white gentlemen
shot a runner
appear to have they did shoot an African American, and the question is why wasn't it prosecuted sooner? And why weren't they arrested sooner for this murder? Because clearly it appears to me like it's a murder because he's dead.
Yeah, and they've since been indicted. Both of them have, and
But that goes to my question. So let me ask you something. As a millennial, does that incident define the entire 350 million people in the United States?
I'm not a broad brush person.
Right.
I've just never been.
But that's what Obama does. Is he takes he pulls that out. He pulls that incident out. Which, by the way, hopefully, we don't have repeats of this kind of incident ever again. But the fact of the matter is, when you have so many people in a country, you're going to have things that happen that really shouldn't.
Yeah,
and
there are going to always be bad apples. There will always be bad people.
There are, Obama is the ultimate in pulling those events out, and saying this is who all of us are.
These issues also aren't unique to the United States. You can find them in every country around the world.
And it doesn't
it doesn't make it right or good thing. But it's just to say that this is an indictment on society as a whole is frustrating in its own right. Look, I do believe there are systemic issues that need to be addressed, and I think that inequality is still something that should be talked about and debated on a political and legislative arena, but that doesn't mean
the key is
we should all be running around. Yeah, opportunity, business opportunity, economic opportunity.
I don't like the word inequality because I think the key word is opportunity. Do you have an opportunity to have a better life if you actually put yourself forth and really work hard? And I do believe that is the case in this country. However, what Obama, of course, is referring to in these two clips, which we're going to play shortly, is that we have this individual. He was murdered, clearly, and that's wrong, clearly. And these two individuals who did it
will be prosecuted.
They should be prosecuted, and they should clearly go to prison for a very long time. But Obama pulls that out and makes that the example of what America is, and that's what has always bothered me about him, because he is race baiting himself, and he creates division. And that's what I've thought about him during his 8 years as president. Here's the first of two clips with Barack Obama giving his virtual commencement speech to HBCUs. Here it is.
And let's be honest, a disease like this just spotlights the underlying inequalities and extra burdens that black communities have historically had to deal with in this country.
The pandemic.
We see it in the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on our communities. Just as we see it when a black man goes for a jog and some folks feel like they can stop and question and shoot him if he doesn't submit to their questioning. Injustice like this isn't new. What is new is that so much of your generation has woken up to the fact that the status quo needs fixing, that the old ways of doing things don't work.
So there you have it. So it's Barack Obama saying that the pandemic is racist. The pandemic, which was started by China and the Chinese communists, gets out of China, Wuhan, China, spreads across the world because of, the Chinese apparatchiks and the communists who let that happen because, they can't take responsibility for anything. makes its way to the United States, and that pandemic, according to Barack Obama, is racist because, according to Barack Obama, it's attacking one community versus another. Instead of using science, of course, to talk about why that may be the case, he's not doing that. He's just doing the broad brush thing, as you said before, Garrick.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of it misses on a lot of the sociological and demographic factors of, where do these things predominantly go, and it goes towards urban centers and
urban centers, high density areas.
What are the racial components of high density areas? But there was something else in there that kind of struck me a little bit, and I think I want you to kind of talk about it a little bit as well. Is towards the end there, he's talking about the generation waking up, my generation particularly. Yes. And while I know, your perspective on this is, that it's wrong, he's incorrect. I think my generation is readily willing and believes that a lot of what he says is true. And they have a lot of them have adopted this
He's very
view.
good at speaking.
He is a great orator.
Always has been.
Funny story. My first political experience, I would have been about 10 during the 2008 election. Hope and change was a big deal back then. The first thing that I ever did politically was actually attended or tried to attend an Obama rally.
Sure.
My mother picked me up from school. She thought it was historic. She thought he was the coolest thing. Listening to his message, a lot of hope and change. And there I was, going to Trenton, New Jersey to go listen.
Always
to him,
sounded good
to go talk. And that has had a resounding impact on a lot of people my generation and older than me, who saw him and still see him as a figure of hope and change and all that America could be. And when looking at the view and the racial components of the United States, his beliefs that, America is a fundamentally flawed racial past, has one, to a lot of people is true. And they believe that there's a lot that needs to be done to address a lot of these things. And it's not as easy of a conversation as you and I sitting here having. Because
and that, we can have that conversation, obviously, on a podcast unto itself. I'd love to. In fact, I'd love to invite African-American Democrats and African-American Republicans present to actually talk about that. And, why are you a Republican?
Yeah.
And ask that to an African-American. Why are you a Democrat when the Democrats have done nothing for you? Barack Obama was president for 8 years and did not improve the African-American lives in the United States. In fact, not only did he not improve their lives, but their lives were worse off when he left office. And so what bothers me is that he never, ever talks about personal responsibility. So he uses the pandemic in this broad brush and says that it's attacked disproportionately minority communities. But there's never that conversation about details. Details matter. There's this thing called washing your hands, which is really simple, and taking a shower a couple of times a day and using hand sanitizer in between. That really makes a big difference, and that has nothing to do with your race.
Yeah.
And that's what bothers me about this guy, because yes, he's a gifted speaker, he's a gifted orator, but he uses it for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah, and I think my point was a lot of those reasons impact and linger with people who hear his message, and it becomes a popular view. I mean,
because he's so influential still.
Yeah, he's still so influential. And a lot of people really do still see him in a way that they don't view other presidents who have come and gone.
True.
People don't talk about Bush the same way that they talk about Obama and, the hope and change factor.
So we have a second clip. Let's go to the second clip first from Barack Obama. And you have to listen to this one carefully because it sounds like a classic Marxist clip. And here it is.
More than anything, this pandemic has finally torn back the curtain on the idea that so many of the folks in charge know what they're doing. A lot of them aren't even pretending to be in charge. If the world's going to get better, it's going to be up to you. With everything suddenly feeling like it's up for grabs, this is your time to seize the initiative.
Yes, workers of the world, unite. It sounded very Marxist, If it were someone else who said those same words, you would think that what he was saying is, hey, personal responsibility. But he never says personal responsibility.
Yeah.
He always parses his words, and it's going to be up to you to, it's your time. It's your time to
inspire change.
Yeah. And the thing is what kind of change did Barack Obama bring to our country? Did he lessen the so-called income inequality that he talked about? No, he didn't.
No,
actually got worse. It actually got worse.
Immeasurable statistics.
Did he grow the economy? No, he didn't, because When you're a progressive, you don't believe in growing the economy because you think that climate change and economic growth are mutually exclusive.
2% growth year over year following a recession.
Awful.
Yeah,
Awful.
It wasn't particularly well.
So anyway, I mean, we included that podcast, listeners, for a reason, because it just shows you there's Barack Obama out there, an ex-president, and he's still taking these hits on Trump, but he had his 8 years. He had 8 years, and it didn't work out too well as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and I just implore everybody who does listen, who's probably of the older generation.
Hey, we got a lot of millennials listening too.
Yeah,
now.
but I mean, like to the older generations that listen to us, understand that.
That's millennial for all you old farts out there listening.
I do understand a lot of the dislike of Obama, especially from a policy standpoint. But understand that a lot of the things that he says really does resonate with people, and so this is going to be a lingering idea that you do have to debate.
That's a great.
We can't really stick our heads in the stand here and just kind of expect that whatever the next ideological challenge will be is going to go away. This is going to be something that's going to linger in the culture that needs to be addressed.
Point taken. No, it's a great point taken. So next up, podcast listener, is something funny. Kevin Powell of the Washington Post is a writer for the Washington Post or the Washington Compost, depending on how you view it. He wrote a very strange article, very strange, entitled "The Power of Stacey Abrams."
Oh yes. In case anybody hasn't noticed, Stacey Abrams is making the rounds.
She's making the rounds
for VP.
And so Stacey Abrams is an individual she was a former minority leader in the House of Representatives in the state of Georgia. She ran for governor and lost, and then proceeded to say that she lost because of racism,
even though she
and
lost
because
by
votes
like
were thrown away and weren't counted.
Percentage points.
All not true.
Yeah, it was the highest turnout in a local state election in years in Georgia.
She gave it a great effort, right, Garrick? She really did.
Yeah, but I mean, the numbers don't work out for her. There are more Republicans in Georgia than there are Democrats.
Right. It's a red state.
It is a red state. It is a reliably red state.
She thought for sure that it didn't matter. It was a red state, that she was so special and that she was going to win anyway. So Kevin Powell of the Washington Post, he writes this strange article, and this article just came out, in which he compares Stacey Abrams to a supermodel.
Yeah.
And so then...
talking about her like she's a runway model, right?
So then the Washington Post has since been mocked, as it should be, for the bizarre profile that they did of Stacey Abrams, that Kevin Powell wrote about her, comparing her to a runway supermodel.
Well, Mark, I mean, her political biography is kind of on the minuscule side, so they needed to find ways to bulk up the article a little bit. So, I guess they had to spend time.
Melania Trump, supermodel, okay?
Yeah.
But Stacey Abrams, I mean, if you ever, look, she's, to describe her, she's not in shape, okay? That's a nice way of putting the fact that, she hasn't gone to a gym recently. Supermodel doesn't come to mind, right? And I can say this, because I think all of us can afford to lose weight, and I certainly don't think I'm a supermodel. Garrick's not a supermodel.
I'm not.
None of us.
This is news to me. Damn.
And Christopher Hopkins, is on the other side here. He's not a supermodel. But why would Kevin Powell say that she was like a supermodel?
I think there was a metaphor he was going for somewhere.
Well, let me read from an excerpt. I have an excerpt, then you can determine whether that's what he really meant. He says, so here it is. Pandemonium ensues as Abrams walks to the far left of the stage like a runway supermodel, stops on a dime, poses, tilts her head slightly, and smiles. Washington Post profile on Abrams reads, "The camera flashes explode. She next pivots and walks slowly to the center of the stage, freezes there, and repeats the pose. Again, the flashes explode. Abrams is summoning her inner actress, and she is both enjoying the moment and getting through it to get to the conversation. Is about her being considered as a vice presidential candidate for Joe Biden."
Could you ever imagine reading a piece like that about a Republican VP nominee? Oh my God.
That's in the Washington Post.
I think they crucified Sarah Palin, and then, she gets this. Man.
So get this, podcast listeners. So when I read this, that she was a runway supermodel and that she pivots and walks to the far right of the stage and then turns and looks around and the lights are flashing from the cameras and so forth, it reminded me immediately as a boomer of the Wendy's commercials in the 1980s that dealt with, that made fun of the Soviet Union. So let me set this up. So Wendy's had this entire series of commercials that made fun of the Soviet Union, about how there were really no choices of what you would wear in the Soviet Union. You always had to wear the same clothes because everybody was the same. You didn't want inequality. Everybody had to look the same, so everybody had to wear the same exact clothes, no different colors, no nothing. And so Wendy's decided to make fun of that and compare that to their burger, which was very different from everybody else's burger, because the Wendy's burger is really large and it's square, and all the other burgers were round and so forth. So that sets it up. So why does this matter? Because in the 1980s, of course, you had this epic battle between socialism, communism, the Soviet Union, and the United States. And the Soviet Union was in its waning years of communism, where things were getting worse and worse. And reminded me of Stacey Abrams, this article about her, because of the fact that in this particular article, it's a fashion contest, if you will, in the Soviet Union, and they're making fun of how they would run a supermodel in the Soviet Union.
Because they all wear the same clothes.
Because they all wear the same clothes. And check out the accessories that they carry. We have a clip on this, and here it is.
Pay attention, please, thank you. It's next day there. Very nice.
Very nice.
Next evening there. Very nice.
Having no choice is no fun. That's why at Wendy's, every hamburger isn't dressed the same. You'll get your choice of fresh toppings, fresh tomatoes, fresh lettuce, fresh onions, cheese, bacon, and more. Having a choice is better than not.
Is next swimwear.
Very nice.
So the funny thing is whether it was day wear, night wear, evening wear, it was always the same outfit, same color and everything, except there was a different accessory. Night wear, she had a flashlight. And then swimwear reminded me of Stacey Abrams, because she's walking on the stage and it's swimwear. She sees this big beach ball and she turns around, this big babushka from Russia. And I'm sorry, that's what it reminded me of, because it is funny. Shame on you, Washington Post, for trying to see something that isn't there, because it's not there. If you want to talk about her intellect, talk about that, because that's what matters. Yeah. Talk about her policies, talk about that. But don't try to make her into a supermodel, because she's not.
Oh, God.
Just like the Soviet Union.
What an article, Mark. I could never imagine such a thing. A big babushka. What a word, Mark.
Babushka.
Good Lord.
So, you know, back in the 1980s, I just want to say, to finish this part of this clip, in the 1980s, everybody, like if you were on a beach and you were hanging out and, you know, you're sunning, you got the suntan lotion on, and of course, you're looking at everybody else, because that's what people do at beaches. They're like, look at that person, look at that person.
People watching's half the fun.
Yes. And you saw someone who walked by that was babushka in size and shape, you would say, swimwear, just like they did on that commercial. That was a thing. It was a thing.
This is the most informative Mark and the Millennials episode I've ever done. I'm learning so much.
I'm sorry, I thought it was funny. And it was funny back then, because that was back when you could have a commercial and make fun of a communist country. And here's my final thought on this. We should do this to China. I'm hoping that some of our big corporations start running commercials that are funny and are politically incorrect, and start making fun of the communists in China, and making fun of how they have really hosed the world with this pandemic.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
You know, it'd be great, because that's what we did back in the 1980s.
We made
everybody
fun of communism.
We would laugh
because
together.
Everybody back then understood what was at stake. You know?
Yes, and hopefully, increasingly, people will be doing the same thing here.
Yeah.
So next up, we have the dumbest bill in America. It's the dumbest bill in America. And do we have a lead up, Mr. Assistant Producer? Here it is. And the dumbest bill in America is taxing violent video games.
Oh boy.
Yes, because in order to get people to stop playing video games, you must tax them. What? So taxing violent video games at 10%. You add a 10% tax onto them, because that's what this particular Republican, Christopher B. Quinn of Delaware County in Pennsylvania, he put in a bill, House Bill 109, in Pennsylvania, and the whole purpose of it is to say, well, kids are watching these violent video games, and the way I'm going to curb their use is by taxing them. Does that work? Garrick?
No. I could get into a lot of the logistical reasons as to why taxing video games at 10% is a useless idea, especially given what games are popular. Most of them, the Fortnite that your kid's playing.
Explain what Fortnite is and if it's violent.
It is an arena-style shooter. And so basically, it's 100 people in a lobby, and they all kill each other until one person's standing.
And you're one of those people, right?
And you're one of those people. And there's guns.
Can't you play with teams?
You can play with teams, you can play by yourself, whatever. The game is free. You can download the game for free.
It's free.
The newest game that all the kids are playing.
So 10% won't matter.
10% won't matter. A lot of games these days are done through beta access where they let you come and play for free, and then you get to continue to play, and they get their money through microtransactions. And what is microtransactions?
Yeah, what is that?
It is in-game store stuff. Like you buy a battle pass that gives you cool rewards like, skins for your character or camouflages for your guns. It is...
And then you wear that stuff and utilize that stuff in the game.
And you pay like $5.
No way.
You pay $10 for the season or whatever. This is how they make their money.
I just learned something.
Because it is a much more efficient way than having to sell copies or rely on subscriptions. If you create something that is cool and aesthetically pleasing, kids are more likely to buy them. Kids are more likely to gamble on them, which is a whole other conversation that I will spare all of you. An interesting thing to
That's a different regulatory issue there.
Different issue.
Than just a straight tax.
But the 10% thing, I am assuming it is because he thinks that there is some correlation between violent video games and child behavior.
That's exactly what he thinks.
And particularly, I'm assuming the school shooting issue. And I also think that that is incredibly naive because are you going to start taxing every movie I ever watch ever at 10% too if we want to start following that logic to its conclusion?
And would a tax really curb its use? Because if I've learned anything as a boomer watching your generation grow up,
pay money for anything.
You guys, when it comes to video games, forget it.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want it, you're going to figure out a way of buying it.
Yeah.
But now you just educated me. You don't even have to pay for it.
Most games nowadays, the big popular ones that everybody plays. So Call of Duty, right, guys? Call of Duty. You probably have heard of that when your kids are probably
Explain
playing.
what that is.
Call of Duty is the biggest first-person shooter franchise in the world. Millions and millions of players. Their newest game, you could buy the title, which comes with like the multiplayer, the 6v6, whatever, all that stuff. But they have their version of Fortnite, which is the largest single downloaded game in world history. It was free to download.
No way.
You could download it for free, play it for free, continue to play it for free. It's called Warzone. Everybody plays it.
And you can pick up teams, right? You can these are people that you're playing with online and you're talking to them if you want to. You don't necessarily have to, but you can. You're playing with them online and they could be living who knows where.
Yeah, I played a game a couple years ago. I played regularly with these people from New Zealand. You meet people from all over. You get stuck in lobbies with interesting characters. It's one of like the underrated parts of video games. Is like
I bet you most parents don't even have a clue who their kids are talking to.
Yeah, none.
And that's a little that's of a concern there. But it does go back to personal responsibility.
Yeah.
If you're a parent, right, you have personal responsibility to make sure that your minor is playing games or doing things that are appropriate.
Do I think little Timmy, 5 years old, should be playing these games? Probably not, no.
But a 10% tax isn't the issue because Timmy doesn't need to, he can play it for free.
Because Timmy can fire up his Xbox, find his way to the marketplace, and download it for free.
Exactly, that's why it makes this bill so stupid.
Yeah.
So get this, China introduced a new games approval process under the State Administration and Press and Publication Department, which is SAP. I know, typical China. And with that in mind, SAP is introducing a number of changes at the end of the month. It's establishing an online game ethics committee to review content, and the committee is comprised of game experts and scholars who evaluate whether certain games abide by social values that China holds dear.
Yes.
So I find this interesting, right? Because the dumbest bill in America is this bill introduced by Christopher B. Quinn of Delaware County in Pennsylvania. It's House Bill 109. And of course, in America, you have people saying, well, let's tax it, which clearly isn't going to work, especially the way you explained it. Now I know even more it's not going to work. In China, their concern isn't whether it's violent. Their concern is whether it offends the Chinese Communist government.
And you'd be surprised how much influence China already has in the world of video games with this cultural conditioning of, and social conditioning for games. So I'm going to out myself as a bit of a nerd here, and I think I've talked about this. I do play a lot of video games.
My son does too, by the way.
I played,
loves them.
I played, a game that's been memed a lot, World of Warcraft back in the day. And they're owned by a company called Blizzard Activision, who is partially owned by a company based out of China called Tencent. And Tencent is also in the news currently for some other things. I don't remember what specifically, but it had to do along the lines of viewing them, basically, they're an arm of the CCP. There are conditions that are placed on games that are predominantly in America, like World of Warcraft, that are a direct result of how China influences itself with its, with its money. So, things like skeletons, right? In China, there's, when we're talking about things that are their social values, it is not always as explicit as, praising communism and things like that. It is, a lot of it's very subtle. It is, graphics and like what you can see and what they want you to see versus not see. And so, they'll subtly change games in ways to make them more favorable to cultural.
Absolutely.
But it's that little thing, that small first instance that breeds these larger changes.
And that is what perhaps Christopher B. Quinn of Delaware County, Pennsylvania should focus on, right? Maybe focus on the creep of Chinese video games that might have undue influence on our children and maybe trying to, propagate communist.
Because it starts small like that, and I've mentioned this on a previous podcast, and I'll say it again, when that issues in Hong Kong were going on, and a lot of video gamers in the professional space for certain games are from, Pan-Asian countries. One of them said free Hong Kong, and because of the Chinese Communist Party said, I can't have this happen in a game that we pay for, they had him suspended for a year, they had his winnings revoked, and it was a huge, huge issue in the gaming space. And this was an American company that enforced that ban.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And that's the final word, and that is the dumbest bill in America, which is taxing violent video games. It wouldn't even work anyway, as we just learned. So thank you for joining Mark and the Millennials. This is Mark Fisher. Thank you to our millennial, Garrick Ross, and of course, our producer, Adam Couture, and our assistant producer, Christopher Hopkins. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and our website. See you next time.